So this was my rough plan to go through. So it was just to talk through the 4 different roles you can do as a GP, which most of you have got an idea about, but I would talk more about the specifics about what you can actually do in those roles and how to get started with them. And then we talk about finances. And we can go into that as much as you like, and then a brief touch on what appraisal and validation is. And then largely it's just an opportunity to ask me anything that might come up, really. There's a sort of loads of hush about finances and talking about money and that sort of thing as GPs, but I'm quite happy to tell you exactly what I've earned doing various different roles. And that's probably against some sort of competition laws, but I think if anyone's bothered enough to try and go after me, then there's bigger things, bigger fish. So I'd start off by talking about locuming. And the main thing with locuming is that I would recommend using a software package. So I put the 3 main ones up here: Locum Organizer, My Locum Manager, and Penny Perfect. And I was just going to show you what those actually look like. I don't know if anyone's actually seen them before, but if I just share a different screen. There we are. Can you see that now? And bring that up. So, Locum Organizer is a way of sorting out life as a locum. Is anyone? I was going to say, I assume that there's someone at least in the group who's planning on doing some locuming. Is that right? Otherwise, I'm just about to tell you something that's completely useless. But Locum Organizer is the program I used when I was locuming. And the benefit of it is that you can do things like uploading all your documents that you would need in order to try and get a job, and then just send it off once. So basically, when you I'll show my desktop. When you are applying for jobs as a locum, it's very simple. You just contact GP practices, either their practice manager, or you look on their website and you just find a contact, and then they will ask you for usually a load of information, and it's normally a list that includes these. And so using something like Locum Organizer, Locum Manager allows you to upload them all, and then you would just email the documents and you could just send them all in one go to the one person. Then once you've started locuming at a place, you can upload your practices, and then you can also upload your the details, and then also the rates and how much you charge and that sort of thing. So this is older now. This is from when I was working as a locum 3 or 4 years ago. And then when you go to book your diary, I haven't done anything for quite a long time, but if I go back to when I started, then you were just sort of booking your clinics, and then this keeps track of all of your finances. And then as I start to do Devon Doctors as well, you start to add that in, and then it's quite easy as a locum to end up working quite a lot. And that's probably one of the downsides, depending on the sort of person you are, is you might end up just booking everything up and not really having many days of the week free. So the benefit of that is that then you've got all your finances sort of on one page. And when it comes to tax, you just download the data and send it to your accountant, job done. So for locuming, I'd recommend locum software. And if you've got any questions about that, let me know. So the benefit of locuming is pretty good pay. You're probably looking at these days around about 250 to 300 per session, I would have thought, certainly around where I am. And it's completely flexible because you only book the shifts you want. And you don't have to commit to doing anything at all. The downside is it depends on the sort of person you are. So the fact that you don't have sick or annual leave because it's made up with the fact it pays better and you pick your times. It didn't work that well for me because I would just, if I was off for a day, I'd think that was a waste of money. So I'd just book it and I'd work quite a lot. And the other thing, I guess, is that you never know when a global pandemic is going to come around and completely nerf all the available locum work. And that just went for the last year. So there's a lot of locums who have been desperately looking for work. And I've never seen that before because it was definitely a buyer's market before that. There was work everywhere. So that's going to be probably coming back, and it's hopefully unlikely something like that will happen again. It depends again on what you get out of general practice, but as a locum, you've got not very much opportunity to actually do anything sort of more business orientated or administrative. You're mostly there as service provision. And so if you just want to turn up, get paid, then that's great. You don't have to have any involvement, but some people might get fed up. I certainly got fed up because I'm a control freak. And so not being able to do anything, and if I did raise anything, it would just be ignored. So that was one of the many reasons I stopped locuming after about a year or so. And it depends on whether you're locuming regularly. So some places sort of live off locums, some places only hire locums now and again. So there's less chance to follow patients up. So I've put a link here to, this is quite a good page for, I'll just copy it into chat, but there's quite a good site there from the BMA, you don't have to be a member, which gives you some handbooks for locuming and salaried, and they've got absolutely massive information. It'll be much more accurate than what I can tell you. So if you're thinking about locuming or salaried, it'd be quite good to have a look there. And particularly for salaried, which I'll get onto next, it talks about contracts and that sort of thing. Any questions about locuming? If you do, just stick them in the chat. So then there's salary, which is what a load of people go for. The biggest benefits of salaried is that you're normally paid by a payee, so your tax and pension is just sorted for you, just like when you're a trainee and beforehand. And that's useful for simple people like me who tend to cock up tax and pension every single year and end up with huge tax bills I haven't saved for. So that might be recommended. You also get paid sick and annual leave. And you're a little bit more secure, and that depends on the contract, which you would negotiate yourself. And it depends on the practice, but some salaried doctors are treated like a sort of like a cheaper locum, basically, and not really spoken to that much, not really involved. Lots of other places, the salaries are really quite heavily involved with the practice, but you don't have the business risks that you do of being a partner. When you're salaried, you may or may not have to process sort of bloods and documents and stuff like that. That depends a bit on the practice that you're at. So again, things to negotiate before you start working there. The rate of pay is very variable for salarieds. According to my accountant, the average is 9,000 per session, but I would argue that you should go in asking for at least 10,000 per session these days. And that works out therefore about 80,000 per year if you're doing full-time salaried. I think if you were doing 10,000 plus, you'd probably be expected to be essentially doing some of the sort of partner without the pay work, so more administrative, more perhaps even holding a list, those sorts of things. And yeah, then you've got variable involvement depending on how your practice works. But you don't ever have complete ability to take complete control over staff and that sort of thing. In terms of getting a salary job, there's the CCG LMC page for jobs. There's often your registrar jobs will be offering you a salary job, and often salaried role is also used as a step into partnership. And I did that with Axminster, and I recommend it because with salaried you've got the option to walk away if it's crap, and you've got no real risks, and the pay is nice and easy. So it's not a bad option, and some people do that forever, and that's fine. Some people, like me, need a bit more control, so would then want to look towards being a partner. So partnerships, I mean, I've said pay can be very good, sort of 100 to 160,000 per annum, depending on your practice. It can be more than that. It can also be less than that, because somehow the average, I think nationally, is 100. it was 100, I think it's 110-ish now. So there are some places that are obviously therefore quite a lot lower than that. I think down in the southwest we're all right. The benefits are that it's your business, so you can basically do what you like, but that depends on where you get along with your partners. Generally, it's a sort of, hopefully, a sort of stable thing. Once you're a partner, most people, or a lot of people, are in that job for life, and that's it. Don't have to worry anymore. You've got control, and it's not that easy to get rid of you if your other partners don't want you. So you're basically just there, and it's up to you to see how well the practice does and how much money you make, if that's important to you. And the tax and pension side of things is mostly covered for you by your practice accountant. But as John and I were talking about, you expect to have big bills, and stepping up to a partner can often lead to some of your biggest tax bills quite early on, because you do this thing where you pay on account for your second tax bill. So you pay in January and you pay in July, and usually your January tax bill is about twice as much as your July bill, but doesn't always work out quite like that. And I found that, as I was just saying to John, for my tax bill for the year, it was 67,000, but my drawings for that year totaled about 100,000. So I was paying 67% of what I earned as tax. Now, it actually didn't work out quite like that, because I'd also had Devon Doctor's income working out of hours, and the business I'd also been accruing money inside the business I didn't really know about. So it sort of works out, but there are big numbers involved in terms of tax and stuff like that when you're self-employed as a partner, which you just need to keep your eye on. So my advice for anyone who's going into any of the self-employed roles, partnership or locum, is to start off with, I would put away 50% of everything you earn. I would say as a minimum, put away 40% of everything you earn. And if you do that, you almost certainly will never run into problems, and you will almost certainly have savings that you've got, and then you have to worry about it. But tax can sneak up on you because it doesn't really make much sense. So the downside of partnership is that you're running a business, and there's that weird bit about being an employer and a doctor. So you might go from being quite friendly with your staff, but at some point they might not play ball, and you might even have to fire them. Well, not you, but hopefully your practice manager, but it depends again on how your practice runs. And you've got to negotiate their pay. And if you've got someone underperforming, it sort of comes down to you or at least you're probably part of the team that's deciding about how to fix that. And it's whether that's something that interests you or whether you just want to be clinically working as a doctor. And then there's liability. So essentially, you suddenly have to think about much bigger things. Liable as an employer. So if your employee raises a grievance, you've suddenly got that stress to deal with, which does happen quite a lot. You've got patients who raise issues against the partnership, patients who raise issues against locums that you've had, but then try and make you liable. So those things are all managed with insurance and indemnity, but it can be a pain in the ass. I would say being a partner is great, and I couldn't do anything else. It's definitely the best role I've had. But I would say going into it, make sure that you've got some sort of get out clause, because practice varies so much. You want to make sure that you're getting on there, and it depends a lot on what the partners are like and whether you get on as a team, because each partnership tends to have its own sort of group of partners who have their own ways of dealing with it, and you just need to find out if you fit in with that or not. And then you've got out of hours. So I've just put up, that's what the current rates of pay are for Devon doctors out of hours. It's sometimes negotiable. So they sent me a text a couple of days ago offering an extra 20 quid an hour. But they're trying to cut down on sort of extra bonuses because it was getting a bit out of hand, and I was refusing to do any shift that wasn't paid 140 quid an hour. So they've tried to cut down on that now. And the benefits of hours, it's ridiculously flexible. So if I show you my Road to Master. So look back in here. I just changed you absolute bastard. Typical. Right. So this is, if you want to work out of hours, it's very easy to sign up. You just contact Devon Doctors and they'll take you through it. But you can book your sessions online. And so basically, whenever you feel a little bit low on money, I can go onto the web bookings. And if I wanted to, there are 6 different shifts available today for me to book, including 2 night shifts. And it tells you exactly how much you'd earn. So Devon Doctors is great if you don't mind working out of hours a bit, just to top up. So I did, when I was working back here, I did a lot of nights, and I was doing a lot of running days into nights, and I would work Friday day and then work through the weekend, do 2 nights, and there we are, so that sort of thing, and add on bits, and it makes quite a lot of money, but I've cut down on doing nights now, and I pick the sort of higher value shifts. So for example, this one is a fairly classic one. So Saturday evening, working at CAS, so that's Osprey House in Exeter, in the call centre. It's 6 to 11 and it's paid £110 an hour, so it's 550 quid. And I used to stress about it and try, because the downside is that there's a lot of patients normally waiting to be seen, and I used to stress about that. But the fact is, it's shift work, and you'll never get through it all. And there's a lot of rubbish GPs who do Devon Doctors, so you're usually better than the rest. So, or at least better than some. You're not the worst, and that's the most important big thing. So, Devon Doctors brought out something saying that we really would like doctors to be aiming to be speaking to at least 4 people per hour. So I was like, oh, fine, well, I can do a phone call and get through 4 people in an hour, rather than trying to get through, a patient every 3 or 4 minutes. So I stopped kidding myself, and I just see it as earning some money and doing the job now, and I only book a few shifts. So it's worth it if you want that. So it's extremely flexible. You can book same day for most things, and they're always desperate. And you can always leave on time, essentially. Sometimes you might volunteer to go out on a visit knowing that you'll be back a bit late, but you'll get paid overtime for that. But otherwise, it doesn't matter what the list is looking like. You might have 200 patients on triage and there's only 4 of you, but you walk away at 11. So the downsides are there's pretty much zero opportunity to do any follow-up. So for me, it's not a lot of job satisfaction. It's just doing the job. Weekdays can be okay, but that's why they're paid almost half what weekends are. Weekends, it's often ridiculously busy, and the list will be several hundred patients who've all been waiting for 12 hours plus for a call. So the first thing they say is, "I called at this time," and you just got to deal with it. But it's not always as bad as that. You've got zero control, and lots of the ways that it's done is annoying, because you're calling up people who have stubbed their toe at 3 in the morning on a Saturday, and if you were in your own practice, you would text them saying or send an AccuRx saying you don't need to speak to a doctor about this, you don't even need to see a pharmacist about this, or speak to your own doctor, but you've got to call them at Saturday in the morning because they've got no other way of running the system at this moment, although they are working on getting AccuRx. And because it's self-employed, you have to do your own tax. And it's a little bit complicated because the tax is changing at the moment with out of hours, with these IR35 rules, which affect people who run out of companies. But again, it's the sort of thing where I'd ask, if you're in doubt about that sort of thing, speak to an accountant. So those are the 4 main jobs as GPs that I've done and that most people would think about trying. There's obviously loads of other portfolio careers that you can have. I know absolutely nothing about them, so I'm not going to talk about them. But does anyone have any questions about job roles before I move on to more sort of finance stuff, which you might have covered or not, but let me know. like I said, if you've got any questions, just stick it in the text chat and we'll get to it.
The only thing that I would add would just be when you're looking at salaried jobs, don't just think about salary. So there are some jobs where you can earn lots and lots, but often the workload may reflect that, in that you will be asked to earn your money. So I think it's important that you find a job that feels comfortable financially, but also the workload feels comfortable as well. Generally, there are some practices that will pay really, really high rates, and you might see adverts that look tempting, but it's important to really clarify before you start what you'll be asked to do. So money is really important, and I think actually this is really, really helpful, because as Nick said, this is a kind of in the past has been a bit of a kind of taboo area, talking about finances. And so you finish training and you go into a job not really knowing what to expect money wise. So I think this is really, really kind of valuable for you guys. But yeah, the point I was making is just to kind of weigh up the work that you'd be asked to do, and make sure you're comfortable both with the workload and the pay. Would that be about right, Nick?
I completely agree. And yeah, I've definitely had jobs like some of the places I've learned about salaried at, which the pay might be good, but the way the place was run or the way it worked just didn't fit with me. So some GPs are perfectly okay with always, sort of finishing around about 7 or later, and that's just how they roll. And certainly one of our salary doctors at Axminster is more like that. She tends to finish at 7 and leaves. We don't really know why or how, but she's sort of happy with that, and she doesn't get stressed by it. And so she feels like it's a good job for her. But if I worked somewhere where I didn't finish at 6 every day, I couldn't cope, because the moment it goes past 6, I'm stressed and annoyed and angry, and I hate it. So I would easily, happily take a pay cut, or to work at the right place where it fits with how I feel. So I get into work at sort of 8:10, and I work till 6, and that's it. And always have an hour of lunch at 1, and that for me is that works. But there are other places who pay more, but I would burn out within minutes. So it just depends on how you work as a person. My old trainer used to say, don't get stressed when it goes 6 p.m. because it doesn't actually matter whether you get home 20 minutes later or not. It doesn't make any difference. But if you stress about it, then you'll get stressed. But that doesn't actually work for me, because as soon as it goes past 6, I'm stressing that I'm running late, and I hate it. So I can't do it. So yeah, making sure that you fit with the place is important. I don't know if this will be relevant to everyone, because lots of you have probably done your RCA or CSA or whatever it is. But these amounts of money hit me like a ton of bricks in ST3, because I've always lived without savings, at 0. I'm rubbish with money. And so when I had my CSA, which was a fortune, and then I had to pay the GMC so that they could essentially, I think, print out a CCT certificate, and then I think it must have been printed on gold, because that was something like 439 quid. And then almost immediately after, you have to pay your GMC annual fee, which is almost the same again, which is ridiculous. And then what I had to pay, what John would have to pay, was indemnity, which was somewhere in the order of 8 to 10 grand, which thankfully is no longer. And I'll cover that in a second. And then I've just put RCGP annual fee up there, because I used to be sort of RCGP representative. John, have you still got anything to do with the RCGP before I go start slagging them off?
I reluctantly still pay my membership. Yes, yeah. And it's expensive. Yes.
So I still pay my membership. Part of that is because I'm a GP, or I'm about to be a GP trainer, and they like us to have RCGP membership, although it's actually not required, even though the school tried to say that it is. But I don't know if I get a huge amount out of the RCGP, so you don't have to be part of it. And one of the big things that the RCGP have repeatedly lied about for years is that you have to continue to pay your annual membership to use the post-nominals of MRCGP, but that is incorrect categorically. So if you're thinking that you need to pay 500 quid a year just to call yourself MRCGP, don't worry. You can either just carry on just using MRCGP if you decide to leave the RCGP, and to be honest, who is going to chase you up on it? But also the specific way is if you write MRCGP and then brackets the year that you got your MRCGP, then that is perfectly acceptable as post-nominal. So that's not a reason to stay in the RCGP, but you can. There are teaching events, quite a lot of them. And for some people, there's that sort of feeling of that you've done a lot of work to get into it, and so you'd like to just pay a yearly amount to remain part of the team, which is sort of one of the reasons I still do it, but I don't really know why I do that, but I still do. So, but it's not cheap. So I think those are the current prices, which is 444 for the first 2 years, and then it goes up to 544, which is pretty expensive. But there's quite a lot going on with the RCGP at the moment because people are pretty unhappy about it. I still am a member of the TAMR board for no particular reason, except that now and again I grumble or complain when the boomers who are part of the board haven't got any idea about equality or diversity or anything else. So that's ST3. So yeah, indemnity, it's just so much better. You're essentially covered, but you really should still pay to one of the companies. You don't technically have to, but I think you'd be absolutely mental not to. So your clinical negligence scheme covers you for the huge bucks of someone, I don't know, ends up permanently injured and they make a claim for absolutely millions. But for support and information and someone to call up when you're not quite sure whether you're going to get some hot water, and what I put there, complaints, GMC referrals, coroner's inquests, all that stuff, you need to still be indemnified. And so I think you'd be silly not to. I think if you're full-time, it's about £1,000 a year, which these days can be split to monthly payments, so it's just much easier than it used to be. The main ones are MGU, MPS, MGDUS. You're probably still with MGDUS because I think that there was a deal done. But so often a lot of them do deals for first 5 GPs. I'd recommend approaching all 3 of them and getting a quote because they often vary by an amount each, and you might as well just go with the cheap one personally because I think they're all pretty much the same. You will hear bad stories about each of them from someone else who dealt with them. They all pretty much do the same thing, I think, personally. So John said that you might have had a talk on pensions. So I'm not going to go too much on pensions because no one understands pensions. But the overall thing is that my financial advisor, who I put up there, tells me that the NHS pension is the best pension and that you should be in it, and that's probably the best option. Now that is a broad statement, and you probably need to discuss it personally. So I'd say if there's any doubt at all, you should get a financial advisor. And again, I probably shouldn't just be recommending just one. I feel like recommending private services, but I do. He's the best. So I'll stick it in chat. So there's a guy called Mike who works Medical General, who is quite a small firm. I think it's Columpton Way. They are just brilliant. So Mike has managed to explain to me on about 3 different occasions all about the NHS pension, and for about 4 minutes I had a complete understanding of what was happening, and then it went because I'm not a financial advisor and I don't really care. But it's good, it was useful for that few moments, and I've never paid him anything. He has done all the work for me basically on commission, and then other than that, he's probably spent 2 or 3 hours chatting to me, and he's actually never charged me. You do have to pay financial advisors for certain stuff, especially if you're investing through them. But for a load of their products, they'll just take money from commission, and so it's just rather than looking up, Aviva on your own. If you haven't got a financial advisor, speak to one, and I definitely recommend him. He's brilliant. So pension. There's a very confusing thing called an annual allowance, which hit people who took up sort of high-paying jobs, especially going from lower paying jobs to higher paying jobs quite quickly, could hit them for huge tax bills from anywhere from 20,000 to 80,000 extra on top of your tax bill. That hopefully is probably not going to happen for most people due to some changes. So I'll just sort of leave that and not mention too much more about it, except to say that it's complicated and you should speak to a financial advisor, especially if you are thinking of taking on a higher paid role such as partnership. As part of partnership, you should take your accounts along to a financial advisor and say, is it a good investment? Because becoming a partner is an investment. So pension, if you're locuming or salaried, you'll need to complete annual. Oh, Alice, yes. Next page is accountants, so don't worry, I've got one for you. So if you're locum or salaried, you'll need to complete annual Type 2 certificates. And this is, again, so pension is sorted out by Primary Care Support England, but the PCSE are just the worst company that's ever been created. They are completely useless and they will never get anything right. And I don't think many people would argue with that, including probably PCSE, but they certainly wouldn't argue with it because they'd never get back to you. So you have to do these Type 2 annual certificates, which I don't really know how people find out about them, but you do. And I think I found out about 2 years after I've been locuming. And so all I would say is for Type 2 certificates, you can do them yourself, and you can basically find them on the PCSE website. But for the job you're doing and for the effort it takes, just get an accountant to do it. They do charge. It's probably it depends a lot on the accountant, but it's probably about 90 quid. It might be less. And they'll fill it out for you and they'll get it right. And then the PCSE won't come back to you. So again, regarding this is speak to a financial advisor. No matter what the job you're going to do, unless you're pure salaried, I would say, then probably speaking to a financial advisor is worthwhile doing. First of all, you won't have to pay them anything for the first meeting, I wouldn't have thought, and then get an accountant. So, here we are, I've put it here. So, I'll copy that up. So I recommend Darnell's as accountants. There are loads of medical accountants around. Darnell's are sort of like used car salesmen accountants. That's probably a bit harsh, but they're actually there to actually save you money rather than just be really boring. So there's a few others that I've used and they are mostly just boring. But Darnell's are a little bit more dynamic, and Darnell's are the accountant that my financial advisor has recommended. I don't actually use Darnell's because my practice uses a different one, but I wish we used Darnell's because I think they'd probably save us money. So if you want an accountant, try Darnell's. They're always keen to get more doctors on board. So the main thing about pension, I'm not really going to cover it because I think it's an individual thing and you should speak to a financial advisor about it. But the main thing is as soon as unless you're a salary job, in which case you can pretty much relax, except for doing Type 2 certificates, which you need to do. If you're doing anything like locuming, out of hours, especially if you're a partner, although hopefully you'll have an accountant covering everything, then keep records of everything. So every pay slip, everything you send off to PCSD, all of your earnings, try and keep it logged somewhere. If you're locuming, it should be on your locum organizer, so that's okay. But the PCSD will, just 100%, they will get your pension wrong. So I, according to PCSE, until about 2 weeks ago, retired in 2016, despite the fact that I've been paying into it since then. So it's taken me, I started my complaint process in 2018, and 2 weeks ago, they updated me up to 2019 for my pension. So I'm still a year or so out of date, but it's better than it was. So just keep records of everything. Just save, if it's an email, just save it or print it out, but keep an eye on it because it's a pain in the arse to go back and try and work out everything that you have put into your pension when they tell you that you're under or overpaid. And the easiest way is just, what I wish I'd done is get an accountant to do it right from the start, because for 90 quid a year, it would have saved me a hell of a lot of effort. So this is one of the things I said at the beginning, where lots of you are probably grown-ups and know about what income protection is. I had no idea. But so I recommend income protection if you haven't already got it. But it's really a bit complicated because it depends on. So this is the amount. If I suddenly get a horrible illness and can't work tomorrow, how I'm going to survive, and you can definitely source yourself. So you can again look on Aviva or look on other websites, but it's a bit complicated. And things like the sort of offset, so how long you're going to go with just sick pay before your income protection kicks in, would vary depending on what role you're in. And again, I just recommend speaking to a financial advisor. So Mike sorted out my income protection and I didn't pay him a thing. He got paid a commission from the insurance company that he did it with, and that's sorted forever. And then I don't have to worry about it at all. So I've included my personal details here because why wouldn't you want to have personal details about me? But I actually pay £57 a month at the moment to provide tax-free £4,600 per month if I'm unable to work. And that's what I signed up for back when I was a GPST 2 or 3 or something. And I've just left, just when I was just about to qualify. And I've just left it as that because I think that I would be fine. That would allow me to survive. But I could upgrade it if I needed to. And obviously you then pay a higher premium per month. But it's definitely worth, I think income protection is definitely worth having. And bad stuff can happen to anyone. So we had a partner at our practice just before I arrived who got cryptogenic organising pneumonitis aged 40. And thankfully she got income protection, but she can't work anymore. She's fine. She's anyway, it's all right. She gets very tired, but she can't work. So she's had to start working as a GP partner. So you never know when something that's going to happen to you. Okay. I appreciate we've been going on for 45 minutes or so, but there's not much more. So mortgages, again, lots of you probably have these, but the only thing I'd say is if you are SD3 now and thinking about getting a house, you might want to get one now, because depending on what role you take on, it might delay things a lot. So if you're going to salaried, you probably only need 3 months pay slips for a mortgage and you should be fine. But if you're doing anything self-employed, they are almost certainly going to, there's only about 2 companies that would ask you for 1 year accounts. Most will ask you for 2 years of accounts. And so if you're going as a partner, you should have those accounts because it's been an established business which you can provide. But if you're just working out of hours or locum, you can earn loads of money, but you can't prove it to the mortgage company. So you probably wouldn't be able to get a mortgage. So it's just worth thinking about. Again, Mike arranged my mortgage using the fact that because I bought my house in the last month as an ST3, so he could pretend that was my salary, and then using my wife's forward salary just at the moment when the junior doctor contract thing was going. So we had to provide a letter of the 2 different salaries she might have, but he somehow put it together and spoke to the underwriters and got me a mortgage. At the time, he didn't charge me anything because he took commission, but I think that company now charges £300 as a mortgage setup fee, just so you know. But there are loads of mortgage brokers, but you can look for themselves if you've got a nice sort of stable salary. But if it's a bit complicated, again, probably not worth the stress of worrying about it. That's actually all I put down for financial stuff. And let's see if there's anything else I was going to show. No, not at the moment. Does anyone have any questions, either speaking or texting, about any finances at all, or anything I've missed, or anything you wanted to say, John?
No, I think it's all really useful stuff, and I would agree with everything you've said. To be honest, I think it can feel quite daunting, particularly when you're used to being in a salaried role. So you've gone through your medical career and you get paid a certain amount per month, and that's it, and you don't really need to think about all of this kind of stuff. And I think as well as going in, starting out as a GP, having to worry about money and all that kind of stuff is sometimes difficult. But I think just having people around, whether that's professional people like financial advisors or whoever, or you speak to the more experienced partners at the practices that you work at, I think there are loads of people that can be really valuable sources of help. And it does sort itself out. It's not something to. It would be a real shame if you were put off any of this because the finances sound complicated. I'm not a financially savvy person at all, and I've kind of muddled my way through it. So the most important thing is that you're in a job you enjoy, and you will be able, if you're not confident with this, there are people there to help you. That's all I would say.
Yeah, thanks, John. I completely agree again, of course. But yeah, it's actually most of that is covered by the 2 lines of get a financial advisor, get an accountant, and it only makes everything so much easier. And I wish I'd known that to start off with. Apart from that, there's not much else to it, and it just depends on the role you're doing. If you're going into for a salaried job, it's pretty simple, apart from your Type 2 certificates, which your accountant can help you out with. And your accountant will charge you sort of based on how much they need. So if you're a partner, you probably pay, you'll pay over £1,000 per year for your accountant. But if you're just asking them for light bits of advice or to do a Type 2 certificate, you will just pay them £90 a year or so. And then a little bit more if you're doing some out of hours that needs accounting for. So I think it's worth the expenditure there, just not to have to stress, so that you can get on with the amazing, rewarding job that is general practice. Yeah, it is actually not bad. So the other thing, apart from finances, because they're loads of fun, but there's other stuff as well. So appraisal and revalidation. So your appraisal revalidation cycle is every year you do an appraisal, and then every 5 years you get revalidated by someone who looks at the evidence that you provided in the last 5 years and decides whether that's enough for you to carry on being a doctor. And so pre-COVID, yes, as I said, unless you're bonkers, you use a portfolio. And the main ones probably at the moment are 14 fish or clarity. Because you will be used to 14 fish, I would say probably stick with it. I've moved over to 14 fish from clarity. So that would be my recommendation. And before COVID, you had to provide evidence of 50 hours of CPD. In general, it's just a lot less onerous than your ST portfolio. But when we talk about 50 hours of CPD, that's just saying that you've shown that you've done 50 hours of learning. But it's quite easy to wrap that up because any meetings you have as a business or any talks you go to, you only need to write 1 or 2 lines of reflection or something and record it. Job done. You have to do a quality improvement activity. You have to comment on any significant events. You have to do a patient questionnaire and a colleague questionnaire every 5-year cycle. So only once every 5 years, not so bad. You have to do child safeguarding level 3, and you have to show that you've got basic life support competency, which a lot of people now are just doing via e-learning, which seems to be okay. Post-COVID, you've got to fill out a form. That's about it. So I don't know what's going to happen, whether it's going to go back to this pain in the arse, or whether we're going to carry on with something a bit more simplistic. So I'll show you what we have to fill out now. So that was what we had to do, and it was a pain because most of the time people didn't do 50 hours of CPD documentation throughout the year. I recommend you do, and there's ways to do it. So use the 14 Fish app and just log it as you go, and then you'll find that you covered 50 hours really easily if we have to go back to that. But at the moment, it's a very simplistic form, and it only takes about 30 minutes to fill out. You still have to do things like child safeguarding level 3 and basic life support, but not much else. So I don't know what's going to be the case for you this year. I don't think we know, but for my appraisal coming up, this is the only page I need to fill out. So as you can see from my last appraisal and my personal development plan, I got really useful tips from my appraiser, like continue to expand my beekeeping portfolio, because that's important for every GP. Alcohol misuse, I think, was learning about it. And then you have to comment on some challenges, achievement, aspirations. And again, you're just writing very short notes for each of these. What's been your greatest achievements? That'll be quite quick. And then you're talking about your well-being, especially in response to the COVID crisis. Any supporting feedback that's available, any significant events that have been involved, and then anything that was been asked to bring, which is nothing for most people, and then to say that you're healthy, and that's it. So that most people say it takes about 30 minutes to complete. So at the moment, don't worry about appraisal, but it will probably come back at some point. So the best website that I could point you towards for GP appraisals is gpappraisals.uk, and I'll link that one as well. And if and when appraisals come back into another way, sort of, as in we don't know what's going to be coming in the future, but I imagine there'll be some sort of hybrid. I don't actually imagine it'll go back to exactly what it was, because the feedback's been so good about the fact that we're not wasting our time just documenting stuff. So I suspect it'll be a bit of a hybrid. But when it does, this website here basically takes you through everything you need to do, including requirements, and it just tells you everything you need. And if you follow the 14 fish portfolio, it will also take you through everything you need to do, just like your current portfolio does. I haven't actually done a revalidation yet. That's due this year, so we'll see if I'm okay to carry on as a GP. So that's all I've got really on life after VTS. I mean, I've mostly concentrated on incredibly boring stuff like finances and appraisal. There is also a smaller part of like clinical, seeing patients and stuff, but I think you spend most of your time doing that, and you'll all be naturals at it. So I don't think there's much point in covering that particularly. But those are the bits that I had absolutely no idea about when I qualified. So hopefully it's helpful. But if you've got any other things that are on your mind or you wanted to ask, please do. And I'm very happy to answer any personal questions about finances or anything else really, because otherwise if you can't ask me, then you'll never find it for anyone. So are there any questions at all?
Nick, what are the night Devon doctors like in comparison to the evenings? Would you recommend them or not? Oh
yeah, sure. So I did really like night out of hours. When I first started, they're quite often quite quiet, and you might even get an hour or two sleep. But these days, it tends to be that there's work available all night long. But I've just decided that I sort of pick my own hours a bit, so I'll work quite. So the night shift is 11 till 8, and so I would normally log on and work quite hard for the first 2 or 3 hours. If I'm just doing sort of triage or treatment centre stuff, I'll work quite hard for those. But then by the time you get to 2 o'clock in the morning and you've got patients on there who were called up at 2 in the afternoon with something like a sore ear, they aren't expecting a call at 3 in the morning. And I don't think it's worth calling at 3 in the morning, so I might leave those on the list and have a break. And because there's only a handful of you covering Devon, I count the night shift as really being you're just there to try and sieve out the stuff that needs urgent action right now overnight. You're not there to provide a wonderful service for patients who can just call up in the middle of the night about a sore throat, because I just don't think we've got the capability for that. So I spend my time looking down the list trying to pick out stuff that's been badly managed by 111, which is almost everything, and actually make sure that they get seen or dealt with. So if you do all right with staying up overnight, then I think they're quite good, and you get to chat to your driver. And if you go on a visit, you get driven. You might, because you're covering, there's only 4 or 5 bases. So there's Barnstable, Exeter, Torbay, Plymouth. That's it overnight. Oh, and Newton Abbot. So those bases overnight, which means you might well have to drive for 40, 45 minutes to go to a visit if it's essential, which means you're just driven for 45 minutes, see the patient, and then come back 45 minutes. So that's not the worst job. So yeah, they're all right. It varies. I tend to do a bit of, I get sort of bored of one style, so I do quite a lot of triage working at Osprey House, just in the call centre. I guess the sort of benefit to that is that there's always something else. You can always dump on someone else if you've got no idea what's going on. So if you just don't know the patient needs to be seen, it's not going to be you that sees them. But the downside is that you can't ever see someone, so you don't get any satisfaction sorting out yourself. But I quite like being able to sort it all out over the phone and not bother creating work for someone. But it does get a little bit repetitive, so then I'll book some treatment centres or some mobile shifts, and it just changes up a little bit. But I used to work, I probably averaged a couple of sessions a week, and now I do a session or two a month. So I've cut down quite a lot. Devon doctors, technically, I think you're supposed to work for Devon doctors for a year or be qualified as a GP for a year or two before they let you do night shifts. But I did my first night shift in February after I qualified, and they didn't argue. So they're desperate for work, so I don't think that really matters. Any other questions?
How does the indemnity work for Devon doctors now, Nick? Is it a lot more expensive to work out of hours?
I don't think it's too bad. I mean, I don't know what, John, what your indemnity is, but one of my colleagues is 800 quid and mine's 1,000. So it probably is a difference of a couple of hundred maybe, but it's not anywhere like it used to be. So I'm indemnified for one session per week of Devon Docs, and it's accumulative. So it's not nearly the big problem it used to be. I used to pay a couple of grand extra probably just for the privilege of working out of hours. Any other questions about anything? Easy, isn't it? So, I mean, just in summary, we just talked about the 4 job roles available, but I do appreciate there's loads of other stuff that you can do. You can work on cruise ships, you can work for, you can do disability assessments, you can work doing expedition medicine. There's an expedition medicine set up in Axminster, I think, or local to Axminster. There's loads of stuff available if you're interested, but I just like the day job, to be honest. So that's all I want to do. There are a few financial hurdles, but they're quite easily sorted once you know about them. And appraisal, who knows? Because at the moment it's nice and easy, but we don't know what it's going to look like or when it's going to change back. So for me, for you, my to-do list would be, if you don't have one, get an accountant, get a financial advisor, and the things you might want to discuss are life insurance, income protection, and critical illness cover. And if you're thinking about doing any locuming, I'd take a look at some locum management software, and then you should be all sorted. Anything further at all before I hand over to John for him to work out something for us to do?
Can you explain what the first 5 actually is?
Yeah. So first 5 is the RCGP's branding of the first 5 years as a GP. And again, I'm going to sound a bit negative about the RCGP because it's not meant a lot. So I was on the first 5 committee, and we did quite a lot of sort of campaigning for stuff to do with first 5 GPs, but in terms of what you can actually benefit from it, I'm not entirely sure. There is supposed to be a first 5 area to the RCGP website with sort of links to stuff that's relevant to you, and I think it might be getting better, but at the moment it's not great, to be honest. So it's difficult to really recommend it. But there are supposed to be more sort of events for first 5s and that sort of thing, but it's a bit dead in the water at the moment. If anyone, I think there is a first 5 rep, but there might not be. It might be. I quit. I don't know if anyone took up the job. So if anyone qualifies and wants to be a first 5 rep for the RCGP, I'm sure they'll love you.
So when you qualify, do you not really get any support from anyone? You're just kind of on your own and that's it?
It can feel like that. Yes. But there is, I mean, the RCGP have been working on a mentorship program for ages. There is technically a mentorship program down here, but again, it's why it's frustrating, because it's been something that I've been very keen on for years, and then it got basically stonewalled, and so it's quite hard to get going, and I got a bit fed up. So essentially, yeah. So the other ways that you can still have some support are things like fellowship programs. So there's quite a lot of those now, and those are being pushed by the RCGP. So quite a lot of practices will offer fellowships, which is essentially where you sort of take on a hybrid role. John probably knows more than me about it, but where you have more oversight, you have a more sort of clearer mentor at your practice where you're working, and you have more time to yourself, more time to self-direct and learn, as well as improving a certain part of what the fellowship is directed at. But also, in some ways, yeah, you are now sort of set free. You've got a lot more choice. You're not going to be shepherded quite so much. So if you feel like you need more guidance, then a salaried role in a sort of larger supportive practice has training, and where you negotiate some sort of initial program where you're building up, is something for you to determine.